2:15 now, so we've got another hour and 15 minutes. So Phil, take it away. You and your team.
Okay, so you can see the PowerPoint. It's just me actually, so I'll go through. I'll just jump right in. So if you can go to the next slide. What's that?
I appreciate that it's just you. Thanks so much. And go ahead.
No, that's fine. I'm actually having one of those days, so I'm logged in twice because supposed to be in Chicago. I'm off work today. I'm supposed to be in Chicago. My youngest just moved there for a job. I graduated college, and we ended up with some flight problems. So we're driving. So I'm actually broadcasting live from Indiana right now. So we're stopped here. So, but anyways, let's just jump right in. So if you go to the next slide, please. So I want to tell you a little bit about the district. We have about 4,800 students in the school district. We are located 16 miles east of City of Columbus. Very fast-growing school district. We straddle two counties. We have a part of the district in Franklin County and a part of the district in Licking County. Geographically, about 10% of our boundaries are within Franklin County, but interestingly, that's 67% of our student population. So the remaining third of our student population sits in the 90% of Licking County, and hence we're very fast-growing. So I'm going to go to the next slide, please. One of the things that's an interesting dynamic with our school district is watching the fast growth. This is my 10th year in the school district, so I came in the 2011 school year. But you can see how fast the growth trend has been. If you go to the next slide, please. This slide shows where we're headed. Interestingly, we're a little off in our 21 numbers there. We're not quite 4,900 with COVID. We ended up really just seeing a plateau, not much of an increase. But interestingly, we've seen a high turnover rate this year. So from the start of the year to the end of the school year, we had a 22% turnover in the student body, which is very high for us. Typically, because of the fast growth, you know, we are always adding students, but that is an extraordinarily high turnover rate. Interestingly, when you look at the district and you go back 20 years, we've had a 330% growth rate. So it brings some interesting challenges when you're working in the school district, because you really have really on two fronts. We're always in this program improvement, enhancement aspect, but also dealing with new families and new students into the district. Next slide, please. So on this slide, you can see that we have, this is the enrollment of our students. The top, if you will, I've grouped them by K5, 6, 8, 9, 12. The top just shows the actual numbers, and below shows percentages by grade level. This has been rather stable for years. We haven't seen an overall growth or increase in our African American or Black population generally, a little bit here and there, but that's really typical. Interestingly, we because of the transient aspect, as I said, we often see more movement in and out of the district in the early childhood grades. Part of that deals with housing, and I can talk about that later if you want, and what we've been doing and what we're headed toward. Please go to the next slide. So one of the things, here's some actual data if you look at our school district, and I can show you by grade level and core area. Overall, this data doesn't show, doesn't show everything that we would expect in terms of growth, but again, in our early childhood grades, we have a lot of turnover of students. So, we see some increases, but you can see the trend. It's very hard to measure this data, or measure this, I would say, because of the transient aspect of the population. Please go to the next slide. We start seeing more stability, though, is in grades 6 through 8, and you'll see it more in grades 9 through 12. You can start to see the upward trend, though, generally, and how our students are performing. This data is all longitudinal, so we watch it as it is. But you would think that if you saw some advances in 6th grade, or where the students are, you would see that in 7th grade in ELA and on to 8th, but that's their actual data. Go to the next slide, please. This is where it gets interesting, because you see our best results here, sans geometry, but you see our best results here by area and how well we're closing some gaps. I should have said earlier too, this obviously takes into account all this data is from the 15-16 school year and goes into 18-19. We don't really have any good reliable report card data. No school districts really do. there's a good trend here. And I can talk more about this and why we think this is occurring. And also part of it is because there's more stability in the student base, not as much movement, but there's also some other aspects. If you go to the next slide, please. Wanted to show you part of my presentation today. Will be talking about school funding, not to take us on a tangent, and Superintendent Maria already referenced this, but we have some funding challenges in our school district, and it certainly permeates things, and I'll show you that a bit. But it's also not an excuse, and I'll show you what we've done to surmount some of those challenges financially. What you see in front of you is an article from the Columbus Dispatch, and this represents the 13-14 school year, and I would say this is our high watermark, if you will. We were one of 7 districts, 49 in Central Ohio, that have all A's and B's on the report card, excellent distinction, you know, even in 14-15, I think, and also in 15-16, we were designated a school promise by the ODE. So all good things to celebrate, but then finances come into play, and you'll see there's corollaries. If you go to the next slide, please. So what you're looking at here is, you've heard about the state funding challenges and what's called the gain cap. If you look in the far left corner, you can see by fiscal year, and what that represents is what's supposed to be our state funding. So in fiscal year 14, we were supposed to receive 14,900,000 and change, and we only received 8.7 million. So we lost 6.1 million. You can follow that all the way down to fiscal year 21, and you can see how short we are in our state funding. If you total that in the last 8 years, that's almost $72 million we've not received in state funding. The reason why I bring that into the presentation is, and I have this represented, but I can speak to it, is our class sizes have skyrocketed in terms of the number of students. We've had some decreased offerings because we don't have the money to pay for enough staff. If you go back to when we had our high water mark, we had, in terms of student performance by the state report card, we had kindergarten with 19-20 students in the class to start. All of our grade levels had no more than 24 students, elementary, high school maybe as high as 25. That's all been changed. As of last year, our kindergarten classes have 28 students in with 1 teacher and no educational assistant. We need at least 6 teachers just in kindergarten to get back to our ratios where we should be, but that permeates throughout the school district. So we actually are short, and this goes on from the 14-15 school year, about 40 to 45 teachers in the district, and that not only decreases class sizes, but it also would offer some additional courses for kids, especially as we get into the high school. We go to the next slide, please. If you want another representation of this, this is our per pupil expenditure, which means the amount of money we spend per child. I don't recall what the state average is right now. I think it's about $10,700. You can see the corollaries with our state funding problems, our school funding problems, where we're spending, about $8,000 a student. Obviously, we're in an immature year. Well, we finished the year and we're trying to balance everything. I believe our per pupil expenditure will hover right around 8,000, maybe less, this year when we finish. We're able to close the books here on the end of this month. So again, our per pupil is decreasing. There are 614 school districts in the state of Ohio. We spend the second least, or the second lowest per pupil expenditure in the entire state. But having said that, we don't make excuses, and we'll go to the next slide. On this slide, you can see what I'll cover here is just an umbrella I'll talk about, and then I'll tap into some of the areas and some of the things we're doing in those areas. I try not to give you a laundry list, but I try to hit some high points. First and foremost, one of the things that permeates our school district is really a study with Glenn Singleton's work on courageous conversations about race. So that has been in place since I've actually been here, and it's something we continue to focus on, and that's our overall umbrella. And then next, we'll just go through different areas. We'll start with human capital, and I'll tell you some of the things that we've been doing there. You can go to the next slide, please. One of the things that we did is, like many school districts, there was a strategic plan in place, predated me, And we actually took a different process, and we started in the 13-14 school year, continued into 14-15 school year. And what we did is we focused more on board goals and objectives. And one of the things that we studied, and I was very proud of our Board of Education, is to start talking about diversity, start talking about, before it was known as DEI, we started talking about some of these things and actually making commitments. And I will tell you on behalf of the board that some of these things were challenging and controversial. Nevertheless, one of the things the board committed to in 2015 is an outright statement in the objectives to say that we will continue to diversify the pool of candidates, and that we're going to look for high quality candidates, but we're also going to look for those who are different race and ethnicities than the majority in the district. And at that time, the majority was white. We also have had I should say that the board affirmed that in 2015. And when I was hired in 2011, the entire board has now turned over, so there's no one here who was, there's no board members who were here when I was hired. So we brought this back to the board and reaffirmed it in 2019. And I thought that was important because now a new set of board, we all always live by this, but I think it was good for them to put their stamp on it. One of the other things we've done in the last couple of years is we also put in all of our job postings that we have an emphasis on diversifying the pool of candidates, reflecting the school district student population. So that's a literal phrase from all of our job postings. We're very open about trying to hire more teachers of color, actually professionals of color. Sometimes there can be overrepresentations of people of color in the non-teaching fields. We haven't had that per se, but we certainly are underrepresented in our teaching ranks and some of our administrative ranks. So we use a lot of different strategies. I just put one in here, but we've been really using a grow your own strategy. We have had a couple paraprofessionals who have come to us who either hadn't finished college or finished with a degree that wasn't really marketable. It was one with a history major and not education based. So we actually have had a couple of people we worked with and been able to get them into the teaching ranks and also our counselor ranks. Very proud of that. One of the other things when you're trying to diversify your staff is to just be open and talk about that what you're trying to do. Again, some of that's represented in the board objectives and again in the job postings. But what we made sure that we also do is just only talk with staff and those who especially are of people of color. And we say, do you know? Can you refer? So we're very open about that, and that has certainly helped us grow our staff. We have partnerships with college education, career tech. We obviously are always looking for good candidates, but again, staying with one of our objectives there is continue to diversify the staff. So this is all open and again, permeates our work. Go to the next slide, please. One of the things we're really proud of, and this just occurred this year, and we're just getting our foothold on this, obviously because of COVID, but we applied for Diversifying the Education Profession grant. We were fully funded at that. The idea of this grant is to provide professional learning for all educators related to equity, diversity, and inclusion to improve building climate and culture. So we've started the back half of this year with that. It's a $70,000 grant, and it goes for 2.5 years. Very excited about this and happy that the ODE was able to put that forward for us. And actually published that, and we were able to apply, which was a competitive process. We appreciate that. You can go to the next slide, please. I'm transitioning now to the second tier leg, if you will, on teaching and learning, just try to hit some high points again here. One of the things when you don't have money is that it really focuses your efforts, I would say, on what is available that within your current purview. So one of the things we're very proud of is our teacher evaluations, and we really do use the teacher evaluations to their truest extent. We spend a lot of time with principal training, teacher training in this. Embedded in those evaluations are assessment data. We obviously follow a competency-based approach. One of the things that we've been doing for years, and it started when I started in the school district, is just living in the subgroup data. It's very easy to do, and especially if you spend some time with the analysis. I can tell you that we've done that in multiple areas. We looked at, students of color, we'll look at special education. But for example, I remember when I came to the district, we had road with a couple of our administrators, and we actually went to all the buildings, talked to all the staff about it, and said we have to do better. And again, we've been living in that data, and it really does help us, as well as it. We then get to the next discussion about diversifying or differentiating our instruction. One of the other things that we're proud of, and we've been doing this for many years, is our teacher-based teams. You heard Stubentville talk about that, and they use the acronym BLTs, or building level teams. So we have those structures in place. We have found that it is very helpful to just present this data to the teachers. We have some very gifted staff, and they actually dig right in on this and offer suggestions. Sometimes it's programmatic, sometimes it's teaching and learning, sometimes they're more functioning, the teaching and learning aspect, and then sometimes it's even curricular based. So very proud of that effort. Again, strong focus on the subgroups and then effective teaching practices. Next, we obviously have had PBIS, and we have been pivoting in recent years to include more of a social emotional learning. With the PBIS, again, it doesn't really cost us anything. This is something that's in the environment. So we really focused on tier 1 and what we can do at the classroom level. A lot with positive behavior supports, and again, focusing on those that teaming approach. So the BLTs are meeting, the building level teams are meeting monthly. Social emotional learning, something that is always important, and we know the corollary is there with how well students are feeling, and what they're bringing to school obviously impacts the learning. And we have had a strong basis there. A little bit later on, I'll talk more about that, because as we start thinking to the future, we have some things that we're going to have a greater focus on SEL. We actually have some programs that we've adopted and we'll launch next year. I would add, with COVID, I think we can all use SEL anyway, so it's been our focus, but it'll be even a home focus for the future. Go to the next slide, please. Some of the strategies and things we've done is we've had some honest dialogue about what are some organizational barriers within the school district, either at the district level, building level, grade levels. And we also always focus and talk about raising expectations for all students. So one of the things, and this kind of task list, but I think you find it interesting, is we looked at our AP eligibility, and way back in 14, 15, we changed that, and basically it's an open door policy now. In the past, we had this rigid or stratified system, and if you didn't meet all the check marks, you weren't able to participate in AP or honors. We've thrown that out actually in the 14, 15 school year, and we've started that just to have an open door policy. Anyone can participate in those classes. That does put a greater onus on our guidance counselors, obviously our school counselors, because they have to then spend some time really watching students. Sometimes kids have, a big heart, but we have to look, can they be successful in those classes or not? And then we talk about things, and that might lead us to a discussion about how we can, if they're not at the levels we think that they're going to be, need to be successful, what can we do to backfill that? And we may restart, but it starts a dialogue. Similar thing with gifted eligibility, we loosened that a bit too, and we're seeing greater increase in both those areas, including honors as well, or scale 3 for students of color. Another barrier we had was our math program, and it's not really that fancy, but one of the things we did is started really compacting math in the 14, 15, and 15, 16 school year. We have found that's been very helpful. And again, it really helps all students, but it helps when you start seeing some of our performance with students of color. These are some of the strategies that have helped us and worked. We worked on a profile of graduates, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later. So we're going to refine that, but we obviously just back math and said, what do we want our students to look like when they graduate? From a program of studies option, there have been some long-standing classes, I thought, or courses that we thought would be interesting. So we've had for a long time multicultural literature, we have an African American histories class, and contemporary world issues. We find that students become very engaged in these classes and are very open, and this ends up being a good sharing in all of these classes. A lot of growth for the staff as well. One of the things that we've consistently focused on is trying to improve technological literacy. We know that's important for everyone. And we've also looked at ways that we can not only improve the staff, but the students. Again, not having all the money, sometimes it forces us to do different things. And I'll talk about a little bit more later, we just built a brand new high school, and we were able to work with Facebook and be able to have Facebook provide a grant, and they actually sponsored one of our high school classrooms, and it now is a STEAM lab. You heard of Makerspace when Student Bill was talking about, so that's the same. Secondary to that, we also approached Facebook, and they gave us nearly $1 million for Chromebooks. So it was a competitive process. We had to go forward. That's the biggest donation we've ever received from the school district. I should have told you too, I didn't. The school district is composed of 7 communities. The biggest of which is Pataskala, but even interestingly, that the city of Pataskala is divided into 2 school districts. So we have a part, and there's a neighboring school district. But we also have the city of New Albany in our school district, and they've annexed into one of the townships. And because of that, we have a very robust corporate part, and we have a partnership now with Facebook, who has the one and only Ohio data center there, and it's completely in our school district boundaries. Google is here, and 54% of that project is within our school district. And then Amazon is also coming in with an upper echelon type of program they're offering. So I'll talk more about this later. If you can go to the next slide. This is the last slide about our teaching and learning. One of the things that we've found it's been very helpful is that we have Columbus Council on World Affairs. So we have a Global Scholars Program, and we've been involved with that Global Scholars. And it's what you expect it would be. It's really just opening students up to a larger view of the world. So, and we're happy to report that we just graduated 2 of our students, the first graduating students from that Global Scholars Program. They say have that on their diploma. And if you're at least familiar with graduation skills, you can use something like this to also address some of your graduation skills requirements. I have some embedded links in here too. If you're interested, if you want to know more about Columbus Council on World Affairs, you can click that hyperlink. The next is Career Cafe, and one of the things we found is important is that we need to do more with helping students be directed in their work and what they expect post-high school. So we have been in partnership with the ODE and our local career tech center, and we had initially piloted one class, career exploration class in 8th grade. We actually have been funded for a second one. We've been running both of those for years. But it basically is focusing on careers, different career options, and then bring people in from the community. And when we do that, we try to bring representation. We're open about it. We want some people of color to be in and presenting. And for example, AET is our big electric provider in Columbus area, Central Ohio. And we've had them come out and present, and there's a group there that deals with Black engineers and all too. So these are good segues or good intersections. Reference the high school ready, very proud of this, even though you would think that we don't have money, which we don't from an operations standpoint, or we're very lean. We have been able to collect some bond monies, and also in a partnership with the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission, which is the state organization. Our $64 million high school was built with almost $21 million from state monies from the OFCC, so that has certainly been a positive. One of the things that when we built the high school, it's built from a workforce development, college and career ready standpoint. So it's not very linear the way it's built. It's not what you would see in a typical high school. One of the things that we started, and it's nothing we've created, but we certainly have embraced, is we're focused on the 3 E's. So, and we started some of that this year, but weren't able to engage as much, obviously, for COVID, because we were in and out of whether we were virtual, hybrid, or all in, and we were in each of those statuses multiple times throughout the year. But what we have is the 3 E's. So what we're doing is putting every student on a track now, and whether they're going to be enrolled in some type of tertiary or secondary education after high school, that could be culinary arts, it could be a 2-year college. We also have partnerships so that you can earn an associate's degree. Many of our students do, like Student Bill said, which I think is a great program. looking at now is also employment. And again, when I referenced the New Albany International Business Park, we're actually working, we're just starting some work with Google actually to back map 8 years out for them where they think the workforce need is going to be. And we've literally told them, let's back map that into our high school curriculum. Actually, you could all the way to middle school if you wanted, and to start to collaborate on those things. So we're happy for that partnership. So that could be the type of situation where students leave our high school with industry credentials and would not have to go to college, or could have an associate's degree in industry credentials. And then the last is enlisting in the service, which we do have some students who still do that. If you can go to the next slide, please. And the third leg here, what I wanted to talk about was some of the things that we've done, in the area of transformation. Certainly talked about culture and empowerment. A lot of these things that we're talking about aren't mutually exclusive to one another, but they certainly, are important. And even with overlaps, I try to parse them out the best I could here. If you haven't been involved with it yet, really, one of the questions was asked about how you deal with staff. We spend a lot of time working on implicit bias. We actually took our entire professional development curriculum, and that was our focus for the 18-19 school year. A lot of that, again, focusing on Singleton's work, but specifically, there's the Harvard Project and implicit bias. So we really have focused on that, and that was very eye-opening for our staff. Under the area of community events, we started about 4 or 5 years ago now an international culture fair. Because of the fast growth of the greater Columbus area, you see more immigrant families coming in. If you look at our initial data, you see that we have about 15% of our population codes as Asian, and that is by federal definition. But in reality, most of those families are from Bhutan or Nepal. So we have a lot of Bhutanese, Nepalese families moving into the area. So there, it's a way to bring some texture into the culture fair. But we have everything from African American through all of our cultures represented. Certainly have celebrated Black history programs. What we try to do there is just make sure that we're not doing that just in February, and we're trying to keep that through, and that's always a work in progress. One of the things I did this year as a community, and it was a bit of a trust walk, but we tried it, is I actually held a DEI committee, and we had parents and staff involved, and we've done that all year. We met monthly. I had that facilitated with one of our consultants, but we did that monthly, and we just finished our last meeting on the 9th of this month. So proud of that, and we'll continue in the future. When you're involved with this work, it's often important to have the student voice represented. So we've had a long-standing multicultural club, and they've been kind of shifting that more to a diversity council to take more leadership role. You can see Diaspora high school program, that's been in place since 2017 or the 16-17 school year. Oftentimes you'll see that with, almost mistakenly, it's put in with people who are Jewish, looking at how people were spread out in different areas. What our students have done is they've started this program, and I don't want to call it a talent show, but it's more celebratory. And actually, with so much available genealogy now, they actually go out and they look at some of their roots, especially students who are African American, and are able to celebrate. And we've been doing this, like I said, since the spring of 2017. Next slide, please. Because of our, I keep harping on this, but because of our financial constraints, we're often looking for grants, and because of our demographics, we can find those, and they're competitive, and we don't get everything, but we often are successful in landing some of the grants. So one of the things that we're proud of, when we started in 2019-20, it's really been paused because of COVID this year, but we'll bring it back. It's a partnership with the National Center for Rural Education Research Networks. Even though our school district really is composed of the suburban, which is that Franklin County side, and the Licking County side, we're still classified overall as a rural district, just barely. So we were able to get into this project, and it actually is a collaboration with Harvard University, and the Cleveland Browns joined eventually too. If you ever watch any of the Cleveland Browns monikers, or you'll see "Stay in School," that's what this is. It's part of this project, and it's called Proving Ground. This was a competitive competitive process as well. There were 15 Ohio school districts and 15 New York school districts. We were obviously selected as one of 15. And this project is really interesting because it's almost solely focused on student attendance. And the work is about how the corollaries are with student attendance and success or performance. So a lot of that is just really digging and living in the data, and we've been doing that. So that's been helpful. Like I said, we've had to kind of pause that this year. But when we did the first year in 2019-20, we did find some interesting trend in that, and we actually changed some of our processes. We're actually able to improve student attendance, which again has corollaries with performance. This year, and again, this is just kind of the fledgling stage, because we're getting our legs under some of this as we get ready for the coming school year. But we're in a partnership with Johns Hopkins University, Ohio State, and then our state support team 11. This is a 3-year partnership to improve student outcomes, but this is more focused on family engagement and looking at those challenges that we have. We have a large immigrant population, like I said, Bhutanese, Nepalese, and then even Somalian, little Ethiopians. And because of that, there's language barriers, different cultural mores. So this grant has been very helpful for us. This coming school year, we actually are going to hire 2 English language learner aides, serving also as parent mentors. So we're excited about that. And it's another part of outreach. We're using our ESSER monies, or those monies, the stimulus monies, and then provided for that. So that's exciting. You can go to the next slide, please. As we think about strategically where we're moving, we're going to continue our current initiatives. And again, our focus, or a lot of our work is really under the banner umbrella of Courageous Conversations. And we actually have a year-long book study. If you're following any Glenn Singleton's work, he just recently published a 2nd edition. So we're using that, and there's a facilitator study guide in that too. Put in school funding there because money does make a difference. And, we're hoping that with some changes that are coming down the pike, that we'll be in a much better supportive position. Along with that, we have our first DEI position. So we have a central office position that we're launching this year. This is one of or coming year, I should say. It's one of our principals who we promoted to this position. I put in their vision and equity because I kind of referenced this earlier. When I talked about profile of the graduate, we talked when we originally put that together about what we want our students to look like, or what we expect them to look like when they graduated. Again, focusing on those 3 E's, whether they're enrolled or whether they're going to be employed or enlisted. But we also feel like it's time to update that again, and we're going to go at that from more equity lens and look at that. When I talked about social emotional learning, and again, I think we could all use this because of COVID, but the thing that we're focused on is actually 2 programs that we're going to launch in the fall. One's Sanford Harmony, and we'll do that in grades pre-K 6. And the other is 7 Mindsets, and that'll be grades 7, 12. There's also a strong DEI aspect within this FCL curriculum, so we're proud about that. We're going to insert those within the curriculum, though. And I kind of referenced, I got ahead of myself there because I talked earlier about the 3 E's and workforce development. But again, just out there trying to leverage relationships, and have had some really good partnerships with some of those in the corporate part. Just so you're aware, as we talk about these partnerships and what we're doing from workforce, we really look at different exit ramps for each of those areas. So for example, or each of those areas, I should say, for example, for education, we have 3 different off-ramps as we're working with students. So our first off-ramp would be to students involved with our program. When they think they want to be a future educator, if they're on the track that they want to go right into the workforce, we're helping with that for a teaching professions class. That's probably working at a daycare, maybe some form of leadership. And we also have then a second tier, which is more of an associate's degree track. And there you're for certain looking at, maybe possibly a leader, director position in private sector. And then the third track within the teaching professions would be matriculating to a 4-year university. It could be Columbus State for a couple of years and then to Ohio State, because we have agreements that way. We have articulation agreements, but we are doing that in multiple areas. A lot of that didn't launch is what we expected with the new high school because of COVID. So, and then if you go to the next slide, I put questions obviously, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those. I know I covered things quickly and tried to cover a lot of ground there in a short period of time, but you can see we're very proud of our work, and again, happy to answer any questions.
Great, Superintendent. Thank you so much. A lot of ground you covered there. So we're going to take a few questions. We are about 8 minutes away from 3 o'clock, and so I'm hoping some of you can linger a little bit longer than 3:30, because I do want to give Beechwood an opportunity to fully present their presentation as well. And yet I know some people may have obligations at 3:30, so feel free to drop off. But we're going to go a little bit long because I want to just give due respect to the preparations, and then I'll make some homework assignments to allow us to process. We're going to start the questions with Tracy Mitchell. Tracy, go ahead.
Good afternoon. Thank you. And it was a great presentation. I do have a question about your D&E program. That's very impressive. Did your work together to build out a DE&I policy so that you will provide what needs to be done on a forward basis?
No, we haven't done that yet. That's part of our summer work. We have a consultant who we're working with from the Educational Service Center, Central Ohio, and there's actually a consortium here in Central Ohio. There's about 15 area school districts, so that's part of the work. I wanted that to be more of a ground-up approach. The board is very supportive. I referenced some of the commitments they've made. But I always tell people, board members like parents on steroids, right? They know what they know what they should, and they know what they know. A lot of some personal experience, but we also want to be able to grow their skills and help them. So they're very supportive of this. But we told them we take it at our level and then bring it to the board. So that's part of our summer work.
That makes sense, and thank you. It's very memorialized and body work.
Thank you.
Great question, Tracy. Meryl, you have a question. Go. You're mute, Meryl.
So, all right, I love what you're doing in Licking Heights. I just have to say, I love the year-long focus on implicit bias. I love that you're doing Black History programs outside of February. And I love your emphasis on diverse pool of educators. My question is, have you reached out to HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, to try to diversify your pool of educators?
We have. It's not been very successful. It's hard. What we find is it's hard to get people to move to the area for a job that's going to offer maybe $40,000, maybe $46,000 at our pay scale. If you're at a master's degree, and our teacher salaries are a little low, as you would expect. That's part of the reason why our per pupil expenditure is what it is. What we find is we can find people if they want to come, if they have family in the area or some kind of, if they're trying to get them to move for less than a $50,000 job, even though the benefits are good, it's very difficult. So that's why we focus a lot on grow your own and some things we can do. But I will tell you, it's an area we're constantly vigilant. It is very hard to find people of color in the education field. And, we didn't talk a lot about it, but even retaining them, because you have a good teacher, and pretty soon the neighboring school district, they can pay $7,000 more a year is, interviewing them. So, but, I would tell you, I didn't put the stats here. I wish we did a better job there, but we're always on trying to do the best we can.
Thank you. Paulo, I just feel an obligation to mention that with the great work that Licking Heights and others are doing, if House Bills 322 and 327 become law, a lot of this work would be illegal. So I'm hoping that people who are on the call are doing their due diligence in looking at House Bills 322 and 327, which are sweeping the country, to make sure that we can hold on to this work that's going to help all of our children be successful.
Thanks, Meryl, for those comments. Other, LaShawn, go ahead with your question.
Sir, I just wanted to add on to, I submitted the template and the information along with that template. This is a question for Mr. Wagner and the task force in general. As I was trying to find out information about that template, one of the questions that continued to rise, and I would quote this, is why Black? Why are we focused on these practices for Black students? And these were from colleagues, administrators alike. Why is that a need? Mr. Wagner, if you can speak to it, or I'm interested to hear from any of my colleagues also on the call. Thank you.
Superintendent Jimma, if it's okay, can I start and then?
Please.
Okay. For us, and I guess we have to use the data we have to use. If I look by subgroups, there's a racial achievement gap. You can punch that into Google and see there's a national racial achievement gap. Now, there's some arguments to be made about our testing. Is it culturally fair, and is it just testing what it needs to be? But I will tell you, there's a racial achievement gap. We also see gaps. It's not just racial. It's special ed, as I mentioned. I mean, when I started, we had 30 to 40% of the kids proficient. Unacceptable. I remember talking to administrators, and I said, so if you put 10 parents together, 6 or 7 of them are going to know their kids aren't proficient. So those are kind of dialogue we have. I would also tell you, women. We focus on trying to get more women in areas that aren't traditional, especially in the sciences. But in this case, what I presented to you was the request of the task force. I can go into other areas as well, too. I will tell you that from a leadership team standpoint, we have diversified our leadership team. And I actually didn't even think about this, which is good, but I think almost it just tipped over half of our administrators are female now. And again, we have more people of color. We have 3 African-American principals in our school district as well, too. But I guess the bottom line for me is looking at gaps that you see between white counterparts and people of color.
You want to weigh in on that question?
Yeah, well, I'll give LaShawn the 30-second elevator speech. NAACP was one of the initiators of this conversation. My background, I was a legislator for almost 20-some years. And we went through DeRoff. We went through all of that legislation. We went through everything you can think of, but it was always looking at it from students' point of view and not from African-American students' point of view. And our goal was to look at, and we looked at every school district of my task force over the last 3 years. And where we saw school districts achieving, we still saw African-American students in the gap. The gap was not closing for African-American students. So that's why picking a school like Steubenville and the other one, we could see students at all levels achieving and the gap getting smaller and smaller. So that is the purpose of the task force, is for the first time in the history of this state, and maybe the country, to look at education from an African-American perspective. And that's why the practitioners who are giving the testimony are saying, we recognize that being a problem, the academic gap for African-American students, and here's how we are closing the gap. And so that is the 30-second presentation on why, but I'm sure Jimma, McWilson, and Mrs. Moore, and others who have been at this for over 3 years can give you the hour presentation if you really, really want to know.
And I thank you so much for that. And I guess it disturbed me when I received that question, because I guess it goes back to what Superintendent mentioned about not knowing, what are they supposed to measure if they don't know? And I don't know if the question was they don't know or they didn't want to know, because I heard the question, it was like they asked why Black students, and I'm wondering, wait a minute, you don't see the same things that I do?
Yeah.
So I thought maybe I missed something. I can't say it was disturbing, but it made me question, like, wait a minute, what don't you see? Thank you.
I will tell you, we don't look at things just monolithically, because I think that would be equally terrible to say, okay, look at every kid in this demographic, whatever it is, fits this category, but there are some trends. And I would tell you, I know we have limited time, and I don't want to cut off each of it here, but there's some bias that exists. And, when I started looking at our data, and, generally quiet little white girls were the ones being referred to honors classes more so than everyone, other groups of students. And their profile wasn't really different, and sometimes less than some of their counterparts. So those are kind of things we talk about in my district.
Thank you so much. That's awesome.
Great. And again, I'm going to invite members of the task force to submit additional questions. Superintendent Wagner, thank you so very, very much for your comments.
Thank you.
I will probably follow up a little bit because I love the fact that you've been reading Courageous Conversation and would love to know how that's infused your staff culture over the years that you've been doing that, because I think that's a powerful book, and I think it creates that shared understanding of some of these essential concepts. So that would be one of my follow-ups. But